The first thing that registered was the smell, a nauseating cocktail of burning rubber, gasoline, and something metallic and sharp that scraped at the back of her throat. It was the scent of disaster, acrid and all-encompassing, pulling her back from the velvet void of unconsciousness with a jolt. Pain, a relentless, all-consuming throb, radiated from every inch of her body, a symphony of agony that seemed to pulse in time with the frantic drumbeat of her own heart. Slowly, painstakingly, she forced her eyelids open, blinking against the blinding, strobing glare of flashing blue and red lights that painted the twisted metal wreckage around her in grotesque, shifting shadows. What was once a sleek, familiar vehicle was now a mangled sculpture of shattered glass and crumpled steel. Her mind, a hazy, fractured landscape, struggled to make sense of the chaos. Voices, distant at first, then growing closer, cut through the din, urgent, muffled shouts that gradually sharpened into distinct words. She tried to move, to push herself free, but a crushing weight held her captive, pinning her within the grotesque embrace of the wreckage. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at the edges of her awareness. "Hey, we've got a survivor over here." A gruff voice boomed, closer now, followed by the hurried thud of heavy boots on asphalt. A face, grim and weathered, appeared in her line of sight, etched with an expression of profound concern. "Ma'am? Can you hear me? Don't try to move. We're going to get you out of there." "Ma'am." The word echoed in her disoriented mind, foreign and strangely wrong. It felt like a mispronunciation, a name that belonged to someone else. She tried to speak, to correct him, but only a pained groan escaped her lips, a raw, unfamiliar sound. "It's okay, just stay calm," the rescue worker assured her, his voice surprisingly soothing amidst the cacophony of sirens and shouts. "We'll have you out in no time." Time, or what was left of it, blurred into a series of excruciating moments. More figures swarmed around her, their movements precise and practiced as they worked with grim determination to extract her from the crushed remnants of the car. Every shift, every careful pull, sent fresh waves of white-hot agony through her battered form, but she gritted her teeth, drawing on an unknown reservoir of resilience. Finally, blessed relief as she felt herself being carefully lifted, transferred to a stretcher. The world spun, a dizzying kaleidoscope of flashing lights and blurred faces, as they loaded her into the waiting ambulance. Female, mid-20s. Multiple contusions, possible internal injuries, a clipped, professional voice rattled off, the words echoing in the confined space. Victim appears disoriented, potential head trauma. Female? The word hit her with the force of a physical blow, igniting a flicker of protest that was quickly extinguished by the overwhelming tide of pain and exhaustion. She wanted to shout, to scream that they had it all wrong, but her voice failed her. The ambulance doors slammed shut, plunging her into a dim, vibrating space, and then the vehicle lurched forward, carrying her away from the scene of the crash and deeper into the encroaching darkness. Consciousness, a fragile thread, snapped, and the world dissolved once more. The steady, rhythmic beeping of medical monitors was the first sound that registered as consciousness slowly seeped back into her. The air was thick with the sterile, antiseptic tang of a hospital, a scent that immediately prickled her nostrils. White walls, stark and impersonal, loomed around her. She blinked slowly, trying to reassemble the shattered fragments of her memory, to understand how she had come to be in this place. A nurse, dressed in pale blue scrubs, noticed her stirring and approached the bedside with a gentle, professional smile. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty. How are you feeling?" She opened her mouth to reply, but her throat was dry and raw, her voice little more than a croak. The nurse, anticipating her need, quickly offered a cup of water with a straw, helping her take small, hesitant sips. "There you go, take it easy. You've been through quite an ordeal," the nurse murmured, setting the cup aside. "Do you remember what happened?" A frown creased her brow as she tried to access her memories. Flashes of twisted metal and flashing lights flickered through her mind, but everything before that was a vast, terrifying blank. A cold dread began to coil in her stomach, tightening with each passing second as she realized the terrifying extent of her amnesia. I don't. I don't know, she rasped, her voice sounding strangely high-pitched and unfamiliar to her own ears. There was an accident, the nurse confirmed, her expression softening with sympathy. That's right, a pretty bad car crash. You're lucky to be alive, honestly. Can you tell me your name? She opened her mouth to answer, then froze. Her name. Such a fundamental, simple question, yet her mind drew a complete, terrifying blank. The rising panic from before surged back with renewed force, threatening to overwhelm her. I can't remember, she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know my name. I don't know anything. Sure, it's okay, the nurse soothed, gently placing a comforting hand on her arm. Memory loss isn't uncommon after a traumatic event like this. I'm sure it will come back to you in time. For now, let's focus on getting you better, all right? She nodded numbly, trying to calm the frantic hammering of her heart as she lay back against the pillows. A strange sensation, subtle at first, then growing more insistent, made her pause. Something felt off about her body. Different. She glanced down at herself, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Where she expected to see a flat, undeniably masculine chest, there were unmistakably feminine curves beneath the loose hospital gown. Her hands, when she lifted them, were smaller, more delicate, with slender fingers she didn't recognize as her own. With a growing, suffocating alarm, she realized that her entire body felt wrong, as if she were inhabiting someone else's skin. What's happening to me? She choked out, her voice rising in pitch, a frantic, almost hysterical edge to it. The nurse frowned, concern replacing her gentle smile. What do you mean, sweetie? Are you in pain? No. This isn't right. This isn't my body. She struggled to sit up, ignoring the protests of her battered form, the aches and pains that flared with the movement. I'm not. I shouldn't be. Easy there, the nurse said firmly, yet gently, pushing her back against the pillows. You've been through a lot, and you're on some pretty strong medications. It's normal to feel a bit disoriented. Why don't you rest for now, and we'll talk more when the doctor comes to check on you. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, to scream her impossible truth, but exhaustion was already creeping back in, a heavy blanket smothering her protests. Her eyelids grew heavy, and before she knew it, she had drifted off into a fitful, dream-haunted sleep. Dreams plagued her rest, a confusing, fragmented jumble of images and sensations. In them, she saw herself, or rather, a version of herself she intuitively recognized as right. This self was male, with a familiar face and form. He moved through a bustling city, working at a bright, modern office, a laptop open before him. He laughed with friends at a dimly lit bar, the clink of glasses and murmur of conversation a comfortable backdrop. He drove down a dark, winding road, the rhythmic hum of the engine a soothing presence. Then, with a sudden, jarring shift, everything would change. She'd find herself in this new, unfamiliar body, struggling to navigate a world that suddenly treated her differently, spoke to her with different words, saw her through different eyes. The confusion, the sense of utter displacement, was a constant, gnawing ache even in the depths of her sleep. When she woke again, sunlight streamed through the window, painting the sterile white room in a softer, more hopeful light. A doctor stood at the foot of her bed, a chart in hand, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as she stirred, offering a reassuring, if somewhat weary, smile. Good morning. How are you feeling today? He asked, moving to stand beside her bed. She took a moment to assess herself. The sharp, searing pain from before had dulled to a manageable ache, a persistent throb rather than a debilitating agony. But the pervasive sense of wrongness in her body remained, a constant, unsettling presence. I'm not sure, she admitted, her voice still sounding alien. Everything feels strange. The doctor nodded sympathetically. That's to be expected. You've been through quite an ordeal. I'm Dr. Thorne, by the way. I've been overseeing your care since you were brought in. Can you tell me what happened? I can't, she confessed, her voice thick with frustration and fear. I can't remember anything. Dr. Thorne's expression grew serious. You were involved in a severe car accident 3 days ago. You suffered multiple injuries, including a concussion, which likely explains your memory loss. We've run several tests, and physically, you're recovering well. But I understand you're experiencing some confusion about your identity. She nodded, grateful that someone was finally acknowledging the impossible truth that gnawed at her. This isn't my body, she said, gesturing weakly at herself, a wave of despair washing over her. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not supposed to be like this. The doctor listened patiently, his brow furrowed in thought, his gaze attentive. I see. Can you elaborate on what feels wrong, specifically? She took a deep, shaky breath, trying to organize the scattered fragments of her thoughts, to articulate the inarticulable. I'm supposed to be a man, she finally blurted out, the words feeling both foreign and profoundly true as they left her lips. I know it doesn't make sense, but I remember being male. This body, it's not mine. It's like I've somehow ended up in someone else's skin. Dr. Thorne nodded slowly, his expression neutral, unreadable. I understand. This must be very distressing for you, especially given your memory loss. It's possible that your sense of identity has been affected as well. Rest assured, we'll do everything we can to help you through this. She felt a confusing mix of relief and frustration at his words. While it was comforting to be taken seriously, to have her impossible claim acknowledged, she couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't truly grasp the profound depth of her disorientation. Is there any way to find out who I am? She asked hesitantly. Maybe if I knew my name or saw some pictures? Unfortunately, you had no identification on you when you were brought in, Dr. Thorne explained, his voice gentle. We've been trying to locate your family or friends, but so far, we haven't had any luck. Do you remember any names or faces that might help us in our search? She closed her eyes, concentrating hard, forcing herself to delve into the murky depths of her fractured memory. Nothing. Only a vast, echoing emptiness. No, she whispered, defeat washing over her. It's all just blank. The doctor placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Try not to push yourself too hard. These things often come back gradually. For now, let's focus on your physical recovery. Once you're feeling stronger, we can work on addressing your memory and identity concerns. She nodded numbly, not fully satisfied, but unsure what else she could possibly do. As Dr. Thorne excused himself, promising to check in later, she was left alone with her tumultuous, swirling thoughts, trapped in a body that was undeniably hers, yet utterly foreign. Over the next few days, she slowly, painfully, regained her physical strength. Physical therapy sessions, grueling and awkward in this unfamiliar body, helped her to regain some semblance of mobility. But every movement felt alien, her muscles responding in ways that were subtly, disconcertingly wrong. She found herself actively avoiding mirrors, unsettled by the reflection of a stranger staring back at her, a woman she didn't know, couldn't recognize as herself. The nurses, kind as they were, insisted on calling her Miss or Sweetie, each use of the feminine terms grating on her nerves, a constant, unwanted reminder of her inexplicable transformation. She wanted to correct them, to insist that she was male, to demand that they see the man she knew herself to be. But the words always died in her throat, strangled by the sheer impossibility of her situation. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? As she lay in bed one evening, idly flipping through channels on the small TV in her room, a news report caught her attention, pulling her abruptly from her restless thoughts. Local authorities are still searching for answers in the mysterious disappearance of Jasper Thorne, the anchor announced, her voice grave. A photo appeared on the screen beside her, the face of a man. The 28-year-old software architect was last seen leaving his office 3 days ago. His car was found abandoned on Highway 16, but there's been no sign of Thorne himself. She sat bolt upright, her heart suddenly pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The face on the screen, a man with short, dark hair, intelligent brown eyes, and a slightly crooked, almost shy smile, sparked something deep within her memory. A flicker, then a surge of recognition. Not just that she knew him, but something far more profound. She was him. Jasper, she whispered, the name feeling profoundly, utterly right on her lips, a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. I'm Jasper. But even as the revelation washed over her, bringing a moment of exhilarating relief, new, terrifying questions arose. If she was Jasper, then why was she in this female body? What had happened between leaving the office and waking up in this hospital bed? The logical disconnect was staggering, mind-bending. She pressed the call button urgently, needing, desperately, to share this breakthrough with someone, anyone. A nurse arrived promptly, concern evident on her face. Is everything all right, hun? She asked, quickly checking the monitors. I think I know who I am, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and disbelief, pointing a shaking finger at the TV. That man. Jasper Thorne. I think that's me. The nurse's expression shifted from concern to confusion, a polite, bewildered frown. Sweetie, I know you're having a hard time with your memory, but that man on the TV, well, he's a man. You're clearly not. Frustration, hot and indignant, bubbled up inside her. I know how it sounds, but please, you have to believe me. Something happened, something I can't explain, but I know that's who I am. Or who I was. The nurse patted her hand gently, her touch both soothing and dismissive. Why don't I go get Dr. Thorne? I'm sure he'll want to hear about this. As the nurse left, she sank back against the pillows, a whirlwind of emotions swirling through her. Relief at finally having a name, an identity to cling to, an anchor in this sea of confusion. But also fear and a profound, bone-deep confusion over the impossible, undeniable situation she found herself in. Dr. Thorne arrived a short while later, listening intently as she recounted what she'd seen on the news and her absolute conviction that she was, or had been, Jasper Thorne. This is certainly an interesting development, he said once she'd finished, stroking his chin thoughtfully. While I can't explain the discrepancy in gender, the fact that seeing this person triggered a memory response is encouraging. It could be a significant step towards recovering more of your past. But what do I do now? She asked, feeling utterly lost, the question a desperate plea. How do I prove who I am when I'm like this? Dr. Thorne considered for a moment. Well, we could start by contacting the authorities handling Mr. Thorne's disappearance. If you are indeed the same person, you might have information that could help their investigation. And in turn, they might be able to provide details about your life that could jog more memories. She nodded, clinging to this slim hope like a lifeline. Yes, please. Anything that might help make sense of all this. I'll make the necessary calls first thing in the morning, Dr. Thorne assured her, his voice firm and professional. In the meantime, try to get some rest. And remember, no matter what we discover, we're here to support you through this. As the doctor left, she settled back, her mind racing. Jasper Thorne. The name felt right, resonated with a deep, internal truth, even if nothing else did. It was a starting point, at least. A tiny island of certainty in the vast, bewildering ocean of confusion she'd been drowning in. She drifted off to sleep that night with the image of Jasper's face, her face, burned into her mind, hoping that tomorrow might finally bring some answers. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark, almost cruel contrast to the turmoil she felt inside. She picked absently at her hospital breakfast, the bland food tasting like ash in her mouth, too anxious about Dr. Thorne's promised phone calls to have much of an appetite. Every creak of the door, every approaching footstep, made her jump. When the doctor finally appeared, his expression was unreadable, a carefully neutral mask. I've spoken with the detective handling Jasper Thorne's case, he began, taking a seat beside her bed. They were skeptical, to say the least, about your claim. Her heart sank, a cold weight in her chest, but she pressed on, a spark of defiance igniting within her. Did you tell them everything? About how I recognized him on the news? Dr. Thorne nodded. I did. They're willing to send someone to interview you, but I want you to be prepared. They're not approaching this as if you are Jasper Thorne, but rather as a potential witness who might have information about his disappearance. She frowned, frustration bubbling up inside her, hot and indignant. But I am Jasper. I know it doesn't make sense, but I understand. Dr. Thorne interrupted gently, his voice firm but not unkind. And I'm not dismissing your feelings. But you have to look at this from their perspective. A missing man and a woman involved in a car accident don't typically add up to the same person. She slumped back against the pillows, defeat washing over her, heavy and oppressive. So, what am I supposed to do? Just pretend to be someone else. For now, I think it's best to focus on what you do remember, the doctor advised. Any details about Jasper's life, his work, his friends, or family. That's what the police will be interested in. It might help jog more of your memory, too. She nodded reluctantly, seeing the cold, hard logic in his words, even if she didn't like it. When will they be here? A detective is coming this afternoon. I'll be present for the interview if you're comfortable with that. Yes, please, she said quickly, grateful for the offer of support, for a familiar face in the impending confrontation. The rest of the morning crawled by at an agonizing pace. She tried to distract herself with the TV, with magazines, but her mind kept circling back to the impending interview. What if she couldn't remember anything useful? What if they dismissed her entirely, labeled her as delusional, trapped her in this unrecognizable body, and left her without a past? Finally, a soft knock at the door announced the detective's arrival. Dr. Thorne entered first, his presence a comforting anchor, followed by a tall woman with short, streaked graying hair and a no-nonsense, pragmatic expression. This is Detective Anya Sharma, Dr. Thorne introduced. Detective, this is our patient. As I mentioned, she's still recovering some of her memories, so please be patient. Detective Sharma nodded curtly, pulling up a chair and setting a small recorder on the bedside table. I understand. Let's start simple. Can you tell me your name? She hesitated, glancing at Dr. Thorne. The doctor gave an encouraging nod. I believe I'm Jasper Thorne, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet infused with a quiet conviction. The detective's eyebrows rose slightly, a fleeting flicker of surprise, but her expression remained neutral, unreadable. I see. And what makes you think that? She recounted seeing the news report, the sudden, overwhelming spark of recognition she'd felt upon seeing Jasper's face. As she spoke, other details, long buried, began to surface, fragments of memory she hadn't realized were there, like shards of glass glinting in the dark. I remember working at a software company, she continued, growing more animated as the memory solidified. Quantum Solutions. I was developing a new app for task management. And I had a cat, a gray tabby named Circuit. Detective Sharma scribbled notes as she talked, her pen flying across the page. These are certainly details consistent with what we know about Mr. Thorne, she admitted, her tone carefully measured. But I'm sure you can understand our skepticism, given the physical discrepancies. She nodded, frustration and a weary understanding warring within her. I know it sounds impossible. I don't understand it myself. But I swear, everything I'm telling you is true. The detective leaned forward, her gaze intense, unwavering. All right. Let's say for a moment that I believe you are somehow Jasper Thorne. What's the last thing you remember before waking up here? She closed her eyes, concentrating hard, pushing past the pain, delving into the murky depths of the past. Flashes of memory danced just out of reach, maddeningly vague. I was driving. It was late. I think I'd stayed at the office longer than usual, trying to fix a bug in the code. The road was dark, and then a sudden, vivid image slammed into her mind with such force that she gasped, a sharp intake of breath. Lights. There were bright lights, coming straight at me. I tried to swerve, but her eyes flew open, her breath coming in short, ragged pants. That's all I remember. Just the lights and then, nothing. Detective Sharma nodded slowly, a hint of something that might have been sympathy creeping into her expression. That tracks with the evidence we found at the scene where Mr. Thorne's car was abandoned. There were skid marks consistent with a vehicle swerving suddenly. Hope blossomed in her chest, fragile but insistent. So, you believe me? The detective held up a hand. I believe you may have witnessed something relevant to Mr. Thorne's disappearance. But as for your claim to be Jasper Thorne himself, well, I think we need to explore all possibilities. Dr. Thorne, who had been silently observing until now, spoke up. Detective, given the unique nature of this situation, what do you suggest as our next steps? Detective Sharma considered for a moment. We'll need to run a DNA test. Compare it to samples we have from Mr. Thorne's apartment. That should at least tell us if there's any familial connection. In the meantime, I'd like to bring in a sketch artist. See if we can get a clearer picture of what you remember from that night on the road. She nodded eagerly, clinging to the hope that science, cold and impartial, might provide the proof she so desperately needed. Yes, please. Anything that might help. As the detective stood to leave, a thought struck her, a chilling realization. Wait, what about Jasper's? I mean, my family? Have they been notified? A shadow passed over Detective Sharma's face, fleeting but distinct. Mr. Thorne doesn't appear to have any close family. No spouse, no children. His parents passed away a few years ago, and he was an only child. We've been in touch with his employer and a few friends, but so far no one has any idea what might have happened to him. The news hit her like a physical blow. Alone. She was alone in the world, even before this impossible transformation. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously, refusing to break down in front of these strangers. We'll be in touch soon about the DNA test and the sketch artist, Detective Sharma said, her tone softening slightly. In the meantime, if you remember anything else, no matter how small it might seem, please let Dr. Thorne know. As the detective left, Dr. Thorne turned to her with a sympathetic smile. I know this must be overwhelming, but try to see it as progress. We're one step closer to unraveling this mystery. She nodded numbly, suddenly exhausted, drained by the emotional roller coaster. Thank you, Doctor. I think I'd like to rest now, if that's okay. Of course. I'll make sure you're not disturbed. He patted her hand gently before leaving the room. Alone at last, she let the tears fall freely. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the profound isolation she felt, and for the daunting uncertainty that stretched out before her, an endless, bewildering path. Eventually, emotionally and physically drained, she drifted into a fitful, haunted sleep. The next few days passed in a blur of medical tests, follow-up interviews with Detective Sharma, and frustrating, often fruitless attempts to recover more of her fragmented memories. The sketch artist came and went, producing an image of a nondescript, older model sedan with blindingly bright headlights. It matched her fragmented recollection precisely, but provided little new information for the ongoing investigation into Jasper Thorne's disappearance. The DNA results, when they finally came back, only deepened the mystery, adding another layer of baffling complexity. According to Detective Sharma, the tests showed a partial match, close enough to indicate a familial relationship, but not an exact match to Jasper Thorne himself. It's as if you're a close relative, the detective explained, her brow furrowed in confusion during their next meeting. A sibling, perhaps, though we know Mr. Thorne was an only child. She absorbed this information with a strange mix of vindication and profound frustration. It was proof, of a sort, that she wasn't entirely delusional, that her instincts about Jasper Thorne weren't completely unfounded. But it still didn't explain the inexplicable change she'd undergone, the impossible transformation. As her physical condition continued to improve, talks began about releasing her from the hospital. But the question loomed large, a terrifying, insurmountable obstacle. Where would she go? She had no home, no official identity, no resources to fall back on. She was a ghost, a woman with no past, adrift in a world that no longer recognized her. It was Dr. Thorne who finally proposed a solution. There's a rehabilitation center not far from here, he explained one afternoon. They have experience dealing with patients recovering from trauma and memory loss. They could provide you with a safe place to stay while we continue to investigate your situation. Lacking any better options, and seeing the quiet concern in Dr. Thorne's eyes, she agreed. The day of her release arrived with a strange mix of anticipation and trepidation. As a kind nurse helped her pack the few belongings she'd accumulated during her hospital stay, a spare gown, a few toiletries, A sudden thought struck her, echoing with a quiet desperation. "I can't keep going without a name," she realized aloud, the words a plea for some small measure of identity. "Even if it's just temporary. I need something for people to call me." The nurse considered for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. "Well, why don't you choose something? It doesn't have to be permanent, just something to use for now." She thought back to the life she remembered, the fragmented dreams, the whispers of a past that was both hers and not hers. She searched for a name that felt right, that resonated with the burgeoning sense of self she was trying to construct. Suddenly, it came to her, soft and gentle, yet imbued with a quiet strength. "Anya," she said softly, testing the sound. "I'd like to be called Anya." The nurse smiled warmly. "Anya it is then. It's a lovely name." As she was wheeled out of the hospital, Anya took a deep, shuddering breath of fresh air. The world outside seemed somehow brighter, more vivid, the colors sharper than she remembered. Perhaps it was simply the effect of being confined for so long, or perhaps it was her altered perception in this new body, a heightened sensitivity to the sensory input of the world. Whatever the reason, she felt a fragile glimmer of hope, a tiny spark in the vast darkness, for the first time since waking up in this strange new reality. The rehabilitation center turned out to be a pleasant surprise. Set on sprawling grounds with manicured lawns and tranquil gardens, it looked more like a secluded resort than a medical facility. Anya was given a small but comfortable room of her own, with a window that looked out onto a peaceful pond where ducks glided serenely. Her days quickly fell into a routine. Physical therapy in the mornings to continue strengthening her body, followed by counseling sessions to help her navigate the bewildering emotional toll of her situation. In the afternoons, she attended various classes and workshops designed to help patients reintegrate into daily life: art therapy, gardening, basic life skills. It was in one of these classes, a basic computer skills course, that Anya made her first real breakthrough. As the instructor guided them through creating a simple spreadsheet, Anya's fingers flew across the keyboard with a natural familiarity that startled her, as if muscle memory had suddenly awakened. Lines of intricate code, like shimmering threads of logic, flashed through her mind, and suddenly she knew, with an absolute, undeniable certainty, that she could do far, far more than create a simple spreadsheet. She could build worlds with code. Excited by this rekindled skill, this undeniable connection to the Jasper she once was, Anya threw herself into relearning programming. The center's computer lab became her second home, and she spent hours poring over coding tutorials, quickly progressing from basic commands to more advanced topics. As her confidence with computers grew, so did her determination to uncover the truth about her impossible transformation. She had a starting point, a name, and now a skill to help her find answers. Late at night, when the rehabilitation center was quiet, cloaked in the soft glow of emergency lights, Anya began to use her newfound skills to dig deeper into Jasper Thorne's life. It wasn't easy. Without direct access to Jasper's personal accounts or devices, she was limited to what she could find through public records and social media. But slowly, painstakingly, piece by painstaking piece, she began to reconstruct the life she'd lost. Jasper Thorne had been a rising star at Quantum Solutions, respected for his innovative ideas and unwavering dedication to his work. He lived alone in a small apartment downtown, his gray tabby cat, Circuit, his only regular companion. Friends described him as brilliant but introverted, more comfortable with the logical elegance of code than with the unpredictable complexities of people. He had a quiet passion for vintage video games and a surprisingly extensive collection of obscure science fiction novels. The more Anya learned about Jasper's life, the more certain she became that they were one and the same. Every detail, no matter how small, resonated with a deep, internal truth, a feeling of rightness that transcended the physical impossibility of her current form. But the central, baffling question remained: how had she ended up in this female body? Weeks turned into months, and while Anya made significant progress in many areas, her physical strength returned, her mind sharpened, her new identity as Anya became more comfortable. the central mystery of her transformation remained unsolved. Detective Sharma checked in periodically, but had no new leads to report. The case of Jasper Thorne's disappearance had, to all intents and purposes, gone cold. It was during one of her late-night research sessions, fueled by endless cups of lukewarm coffee, that Anya stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold, sending a shiver of mingled fear and exhilaration down her spine. Buried deep in an obscure tech forum, one dedicated to theoretical applications of advanced computing, she found a thread discussing quantum entanglement. Most of it was well beyond her current understanding, a dizzying array of complex equations and abstract concepts, but one particular post caught her eye. The user, posting under the enigmatic name Chronos Shifter, described a hypothetical scenario in which quantum entanglement could theoretically be used to transfer consciousness between parallel universes. It was pure speculation, the kind of wild conjecture usually relegated to the realm of science fiction, but something about it resonated with Anya, striking a deep, unsettling chord. She dug deeper, tracing Chronos Shifter's posts across various forums and obscure scientific websites. The user's knowledge of quantum mechanics was undeniably impressive, their theories wild and boundary-pushing, yet grounded in real scientific principles. And then, in a post from just days before Jasper's disappearance, she found something that made her heart race, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Chronos Shifter claimed to have made a significant breakthrough, hinting at a real-world experiment that could, potentially, prove their audacious theories. The post was deliberately vague on details, shrouded in a cloak of scientific jargon and tantalizing hints, but it mentioned needing a test subject. Someone daring enough, desperate enough, or perhaps brilliant enough to be willing to risk everything for the sake of scientific advancement. With shaking hands, Anya pulled up Jasper's work emails, which she'd managed to access through some less than legal, but undeniably effective means. There, buried in his sent folder, among dozens of technical reports and meeting invitations, she found a message to an unnamed recipient. The subject line was simply, Project Chimera. The body of the email contained only 3 terse, yet profoundly significant words. I'm in. When and where? The pieces began to fall into place in Anya's mind with terrifying clarity. Had Jasper, brilliant and introverted, yet perhaps starved for intellectual challenge, volunteered for some mad scientist's incredibly risky quantum experiment? Had something gone horribly, catastrophically wrong, catapulting his consciousness not just to another universe, but into an entirely different body? It was a fantastic theory, one that any reasonable person would dismiss out of hand as the ravings of a traumatized mind. But given everything she'd experienced, everything she now was, Anya couldn't shake the chilling, inescapable feeling that she might be on to something profoundly, terrifyingly true. This wasn't just speculation, it was becoming a roadmap to her lost past. Energized by this potential lead, this sliver of tangible hope, Anya redoubled her efforts to uncover the truth. She scoured the internet for any trace of Chronos Shifter, delving into academic databases, obscure research papers, and even reaching out, cautiously, to contacts in the tech world that she remembered from Jasper's fragmented life. Her persistence, a stubborn trait she recognized from her former self, eventually paid off when she received a cryptic email from an anonymous sender. The message contained only an address and a time, along with the chilling yet alluring words, "If you want answers, come alone." Anya knew it was incredibly risky. She had no idea who she'd be meeting or what their intentions might be. The fear was a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but the desperate need for answers, for understanding, outweighed her caution. She had to know. Slipping out of the rehabilitation center after lights out, under the cloak of a moonless night, she took a taxi to the address provided. It led her to a sprawling, abandoned warehouse on the desolate outskirts of town, its corrugated metal walls rusting in the damp night air. As she approached the main entrance, a massive, rusted metal door, her heart pounded a frantic rhythm in her chest. Just as her hand reached for the cold, grimy handle, a voice, calm and clear, called out from the deep shadows of the warehouse entrance. "Jasper?" Or should I say Anya? A figure stepped into the weak, flickering light of a single bare bulb hanging overhead. It was a woman with wild, almost electrically charged gray hair and piercing, intelligent blue eyes. She looked to be in her late 60s, her features weathered, but with the sharp, alert gaze of someone who had spent too much time indoors, hunched over screens and complex equations. "Who are you?" Anya demanded, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to keep it steady. The woman's lips curled into a sad, almost regretful smile. "I'm the one responsible for your current situation, I'm afraid. My name is Dr. Alara Vance, but you might know me better as Chronos Shifter." Anya's mind reeled. Here, at last, was the person who held the keys to her impossible past, the architect of her bewildering present. "What did you do to me?" she asked, a raw mix of anger and desperate pleading in her voice. Dr. Vance sighed heavily, her gaze fixed on some distant point. "I didn't intend for this to happen, believe me. The experiment was supposed to be a simple consciousness transfer. A brief journey to a parallel universe and back. A proof of concept for Project Chimera. But something went wrong. The quantum entanglement became unstable, and instead of returning to your original body, you were redirected." "Redirected?" Anya echoed, the word tasting like ash. "I'm in a completely different body. How is that even possible?" "The multiverse is vast and strange, Anya," Dr. Vance explained, her eyes taking on a faraway, almost dreamy look, as if gazing into the very fabric of space-time. "In this particular universe, it seems Jasper Thorne was born female. Your consciousness, adrift and destabilized, latched onto the nearest compatible brain, hers." Anya's head spun with the horrifying implications. "So, what happened to the me from this universe? The original Anya?" Dr. Vance's expression grew grim, shadowed with a profound regret. "I'm afraid she's gone. When your consciousness arrived, it overwrote hers. In a sense, you've become a fusion of both Jasper and Anya. A new entity, born from a cosmic accident." The weight of this revelation hit Anya like a physical blow. She stumbled back, bracing herself against a nearby stack of crates, the cold metal digging into her back. Not only had she lost her old life, her old self, but she'd inadvertently, tragically, stolen someone else's. The guilt was a heavy, crushing burden. "Can you reverse it?" she asked, already dreading the answer, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Vance shook her head slowly, her gaze filled with a deep, almost unbearable sorrow. "I'm sorry, Anya, but no. The original quantum link has long since collapsed. Even if we could recreate the experiment, there's no guarantee it would send you back to your original universe. The risks would be astronomical, and the likelihood of success almost zero." Anya slumped to the ground, overwhelmed by the crushing finality of it all. "So that was it. No going back. No undoing the impossible." "So that's it," she said, her voice hollow. "I'm just stuck like this, forever?" The scientist knelt beside her, placing a hesitant, almost fragile hand on her shoulder. "I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but you've been given a second chance at life, Anya. In a way, a unique, unprecedented opportunity. It's up to you to decide what to do with it now." They talked for hours, the vast, echoing warehouse filled with the low murmur of their voices. Dr. Vance, remorseful but also eager to share the incredible scientific implications of her accidental success, explained the intricacies of her experiment, the theories behind it, the tantalizing glimpses of quantum reality she had uncovered. Anya listened, alternating between a profound, almost detached fascination at the scientific implications and a deep, aching grief for the life she'd lost, the identity that was now irrevocably gone. As dawn began to break, casting long, ethereal shadows through the grimy warehouse windows, painting the dust-filled air in shades of bruised purple and pale gold, Dr. Vance finally stood to leave. "I can't undo what's been done," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet resignation. "But I can offer you this." She handed Anya a small, sleek USB drive. It contains all of Jasper's personal files. Photos, documents, journals, everything I could salvage from his devices before the authorities seized everything else. It's not much, but it might help you hold on to who you were while you figure out who you're going to be. Anya clutched the drive tightly, the small, cold metal a tangible link to her past. Tears welled in her eyes, not just of sorrow, but of a strange, nascent hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As Dr. Vance turned to go, Anya called out, her voice barely a breath. "Wait. What? What do I do now?" The scientist paused, looking back with that same sad, knowing smile. "Live, Anya. It's all any of us can do. Live and make the most of this strange, new world you find yourself in. Embrace the new and carry the best of the old with you." With that, she turned and disappeared into the growing light of the new day, leaving Anya alone in the vast, empty warehouse, holding the fragile remnants of her past and the daunting, exhilarating promise of her future.